In my family, loyalty was a weapon, and I was always the target. My name is Jade Brooks, and for 28 years I'd been the good daughter, the one who stepped aside. My home, with its scent of lemon polish and simmering resentment, was a shrine to my brother Lucas. He was the golden boy. I was just the shadow. But this was supposed to be my moment, my engagement party. Then, Lucas showed up with a special surprise designed to make the day unforgettable. He didn't know he was about to start a war. He didn't know I was finally done being invisible. Like, share, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We always appreciate the time you spent here with us. The scent of lemon polish and simmering potpourri always hits me first. It's the smell of my childhood, the smell of our suburban home in a town where the lawns were manicured and secrets were kept just as neatly. Our house was a shrine to appearances. My mother Elaine kept it spotless, a physical manifestation of the perfection she demanded from us. The grandfather clock in the hall didn't just tell time, it measured our every action against the rigid standards of community standing, of family loyalty. And in the Brooks family, loyalty was a one-way street flowing directly to the center of our universe, my brother Lucas. I'm Jade Brooks. I'm 28, I have a successful career as a project manager, and I'm engaged to a wonderful man. On paper, I am the achievement my parents always claimed to value, but in reality, I am the family's designated shock absorber. My empathy, my intelligence, my sensible nature. These were not traits to be celebrated, but tools to be used to manage the egos of others. I've spent my life being conditioned to accommodate, to make myself smaller, to let others shine. That conditioning is a scar, a constant nagging whisper of self-doubt that tells me my needs are secondary. I remember the promotion I got last year. I called home excited, and my mother's first response was, "Oh, that's nice, dear. Did you hear Lucas is thinking of getting into real estate? He'd be a natural." I didn't even have to close my eyes to see the pattern. My 10th grade science fair trophy was shoved behind my father's bowling awards. My college graduation party was combined with a welcome home for the summer barbecue for Lucas. Every milestone of mine was just a backdrop for him. This wasn't just favoritism, it was a subtle, consistent emotional erosion, a lifetime of being told, "Don't make a fuss, Jade. Let your brother have his moment." Lucas is a master of moments. He's all charisma and blinding smiles, a manipulator wrapped in the packaging of a golden boy. He can charm anyone, which is why my parents Elaine and Richard have spent their lives paving his way. They see him as an extension of their own ambitions, while I am merely a supporting character, well-meaning, but ultimately forgettable. They aren't cruel people, not actively. They simply operate on a deeply ingrained bias, a complete inability to see my value when Lucas is in the room. They undermine me with good intentions, gaslight me with family values, and always smooth things over for his benefit. This time, it was supposed to be different. This was my engagement party. My fiancé Marcus and I had been planning it for weeks. We wanted something intimate, a reflection of us set in the gardens I'd spent all summer tending. I was standing in the kitchen finalizing the playlist when the front door slammed open, rattling the china in the display cabinet. "The prodigal son returns," Lucas boomed. My stomach twisted. He wasn't due for another 5 days. He swept in, dropping his designer duffel bag on the pristine floor, kissing our mother and clapping our father Richard on the back. He was a whirlwind of energy, and my parents were instantly caught in his vortex. "Don't you worry your pretty little head, sis," he said, winking at me as he snagged an olive from a bowl. "I'm here to help. This party needs the Lucas Brooks touch." His touch felt more like a sledgehammer. He glanced at my string light samples. A bit anemic, don't you think, Jade? We need drama, fire, maybe a full ice sculpture. Before I could explain that drama was the exact opposite of our theme, he was already scrolling through his phone. I know a guy who can get us a custom one, you and Marcus. Maybe holding a giant heart tacky, I know, but the relatives will eat it up. I forced a tight smile. Lucas, we already decided on the lighting. It's meant to be subtle. My mother chimed in, placing a placating hand on my arm. Oh, Jade, he's just excited. He just wants to contribute. Such wonderful ideas. I looked at my father, my last hope for sanity. He just chuckled, shaking his head with that infuriating mix of pride and exasperation. That's our Lucas, always aiming for the spotlight. My frustration began to bubble hot and acidic in my throat. I felt myself shrinking, the competent professional disappearing, replaced by the invisible daughter. I was planning the most important pre-wedding event of my life, and in less than 10 minutes, I'd been reduced to an assistant. My carefully organized plans, the spreadsheets, the vendor contracts, all brushed aside by his casual arrogance and our parents' blind adoration. I tried to pivot to take back control. Anyway, I said, my voice firmer than I felt, I need to finalize the toast schedule. Lucas held up a hand, a gesture that instantly silenced the room. He had that gleam in his eye, the one that always preceded a power play, a move designed to make him the hero and me the collateral damage. Actually, everyone, he announced, his voice smooth as silk, I've been thinking. This little get-together needs something special, a real showstopper. He paused, letting the silence hang, soaking up my parents' rapt attention. So I've arranged a little surprise. Don't worry, you can all thank me later. It's something that will make this event truly unforgettable. My mother gasped in delight. My father beamed. But I just stood there, the playlist frozen on my screen, my breath caught in my chest. A cold, familiar dread washed over me. I knew exactly who this unforgettable moment was for, and it wasn't for me. Lucas's special idea hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My parents were already gushing, asking him for details he theatrically refused to share. It's a surprise, Mom, you'll love it. I felt that old familiar ache tighten my chest. It was the exact same feeling I had on my 16th birthday. I'd saved for a year to buy a specific dress only for Lucas to accidentally spill an entire bottle of grape soda on it an hour before my party. My mother, seeing my tears, had sighed and said, "Oh, Jade, don't be dramatic. It's just a dress. Lucas didn't mean it." But I'd seen the smirk he'd given me over her shoulder. He hadn't just ruined the dress. He'd stolen my moment, my confidence, my right to be angry. And now, he was doing it again. The next 2 days were a blur of escalating tension. My carefully curated plans were treated as mere suggestions. Lucas, with my parents' blessing, decided the string lights were too anemic and ordered towering, gaudy floral arrangements that completely clashed with the garden's natural beauty. It adds pizzazz, Jade, my father declared, as if pizzazz was what one aimed for at an intimate gathering. I was trapped in a loop, my professional competence dissolving. I'd managed teams of 20 at work, but at home I couldn't even manage my own party. My conditioning, that deep-seated need to keep the peace and defer, was at war with the screaming adult part of me that wanted to set fire to his tacky floral centerpieces. I tried to negotiate. "Lucas," I said, catching him in the hall. "I appreciate the enthusiasm, but Marcus and I really wanted a low-key feel. Could we possibly scale this back?" He just laughed, that easy, charming laugh that always disarmed our parents. "Low-key is just code for boring, sis. Trust me, people want a show." My mother overheard. "Jade, stop being ungrateful. Your brother is going to so much trouble. Why must you always find something to complain about?" There it was, the gaslighting. My valid concerns were reframed as complaints. My desire for autonomy was painted as ingratitude. I was being minimized just as I'd always been. Later that night, I was venting on the phone to my best friend Nina. She'd been my colleague for 5 years, a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen the Brooks family dynamic in small, toxic doses. "He's not helping Jade," she'd said, her voice crisp. "He's staging a coup. That's a classic narcissistic power play. You need to shut it down." "I'm trying," I whispered, huddled in the pantry. "But my parents, they're just so happy he's here." "They're not happy, they're enabled. Don't let them make you the villain for having boundaries." Then Marcus arrived. He walked into the chaos, took one look at the ice luge Lucas was directing onto the patio, and found me. He didn't say, "It's not that bad." He didn't say, "Just ignore him." He just wrapped his arms around me, his presence a solid, grounded anchor. "This is insane," he murmured into my hair, his voice low and protective. "This is not our party." His validation was like oxygen. It wasn't just in my head. The day of the party arrived. I felt sick with dread. I put on my dress, a simple, elegant white silk number, and Marcus was in his navy suit. We looked like us. Then Lucas made his entrance. He descended the stairs wearing a cream-colored linen suit, dangerously close to white, with a flashy gold watch. He looked less like a guest and more like the groom. He immediately took over greeting guests, as if he were the host charming Marcus's parents and directing the caterers. I saw him slip the DJ a different USB stick. "A better playlist," he announced to the room. My playlist, the one Marcus and I had spent hours on, gone. I tried to intercept him to regain control, but my parents were always in the way, beaming at their son. "Isn't he wonderful?" my mother whispered to my aunt. "He's just taken charge of everything." I felt myself dissociating, watching the scene from outside my own body. This was my nightmare. This was my 16th birthday all over again, but this time it was public. This time my future in-laws were watching. The final straw came just as we were about to do the toasts. I saw Lucas walk up to the small raised platform, tapping the microphone. My heart stopped. This was it. This was his special idea. He was going to take the mic, make this night about him, and I would be forced to stand there and smile, the ever-accommodating daughter, while he humiliated me. I looked at my parents, who were smiling encouragingly at him. I looked at Lucas, his face a mask of smug charm. I felt trapped, powerless, a lifetime of being silenced, culminating in this single awful moment. I was going to let him do it. I was going to let him ruin this just like he'd ruined everything else. Then I felt a hand slide into mine. Marcus. He wasn't looking at Lucas. He was looking at me, his gaze steady, unwavering, and filled with a quiet, furious strength. He didn't say a word, but his grip tightened. It wasn't a question. It was a statement. No. Not this time. That grip, that unwavering support cut through the fog of my conditioning. It was a spark, a tiny, hard glimmer of agency. The panic didn't recede, but something new rose up to meet it: anger. Pure, cold, and clarifying. The spark from Marcus's hand ignited the anger I'd been swallowing for 28 years. The sight of Lucas, so smug and confident, tapping the microphone that should have been mine, broke something deep inside me. The fog of accommodation evaporated, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. I let go of Marcus's hand and I moved. I didn't rush. I walked deliberately toward the platform, my heels clicking on the stone patio, a sound that seemed to silence the murmuring guests. Lucas faltered, his prepared, witty opening dying on his lips as he saw my expression. I didn't stop until I was standing directly in front of him. I put my hand out for the microphone. "Thank you, Lucas," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, but carrying in the sudden hush. "But we will be handling the toasts." He tried to laugh it off, tightening his grip. "Come on, sis, I've got this. Just trying to help you out." "I don't need your help," I said, not backing down. "I need you to step aside. This is not your event." I saw Marcus move into my peripheral vision, standing at the base of the platform, a silent, solid wall of support. I saw Nina across the garden make a beeline for the DJ booth. "Jade, darling." My mother's voice was a sharp whisper of panic. "Don't make a scene. Lucas organized this part for you." My father chimed in, his tone pleading. "Listen to your mother, Jade. Let him talk. He worked so hard on this surprise. Don't spoil it for everyone. Spoil it. For everyone. As if my feelings were a contaminant. As if my right to my own party was a childish whim. Their words meant to guilt-trip me into submission had the opposite effect. The dam of my manufactured patience built over decades didn't just crack, it pulverized. A lifetime of injustices flooded my mind in a dizzying, painful stream of consciousness. I was 10, and Lucas tripped over my science fair project on plate tectonics, smashing the clay volcanoes I'd spent a month building. My parents told me to be the bigger person, because he felt so terrible even as I watched him high-five his friend. I was 18, and Lucas read my diary aloud at a family dinner mocking my high school crush. My parents laughed and told me I was too sensitive. Every promotion, every achievement, every flicker of my own light had been immediately dimmed to make his shine brighter. They weren't just enabling him, they were sacrificing me. This wasn't family loyalty. It was a ritual, and I was the offering. That realization forged something new in my voice. When I spoke again, the tremor was gone. No. The word cut through the air. It was a complete sentence, a final judgment. This is our party, I said, my eyes locked on my brother's, which were now narrowed in genuine anger. This is our engagement. It is not your stage. It is not your show, and you will not take this from me. I pulled the microphone from his stunned grasp. He was so used to me folding that my resistance left him momentarily paralyzed. I turned to the guests, my heart hammering against my ribs, but my voice resonating with a power I didn't know I possessed. Marcus and I are so thrilled you're all here to celebrate with us. We'll be starting our planned toasts in just a moment. I handed the mic to Marcus, who took it with a look of pure, unadulterated pride. Then I went to work. This was a project, and I was a project manager. The objective: reclaim my night. I walked directly to the DJ booth. Nina was already there in a quiet, heated argument with the DJ Lucas had hired. He told me to play his mix only, the DJ protested. I pulled my original USB stick from my evening bag. You will play this playlist, I said, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. Now, or your services are no longer required and you will not be paid. His eyes widened. He took the USB. I found the catering captain. From this moment, you will take direction only from me, Marcus, or that woman over there. I pointed to Nina. No one else, especially not him. I pointed at Lucas. The captain, seeing my resolve, nodded sharply. Yes, ma'am. I was rewriting the event plan in real time. I was securing my logistics. This was my individual agency, my self-respect pushing back against a lifetime of toxic obligation. This was the American ideal of forging your own path, even if it meant leaving your blood relatives on the side of the road. My Uncle Ben, my father's estranged, level-headed brother, caught my eye and gave me a slow, approving nod. He'd seen the dynamic for years. My mother, however, was not impressed. She grabbed my arm as I passed, her face pale with fury. How could you? She hissed, her voice trembling. You are humiliating your brother in front of everyone. You are ruining this family. The final shred of my old self, the one who would have apologized, simply disintegrated. He humiliated me, I said, my voice cold and even. You both have. My entire life. You let him break my things, steal my moments, and gaslight me into thinking I was the problem. Not anymore. This is my day, my life, and I am done being a supporting character. I pulled my arm free and walked back to Marcus. The obnoxious dance music Lucas had put on faded out, and the soft acoustic melody Marcus and I had chosen began to play. Relief washed over me. I had done it. I had won. Marcus wrapped an arm around my waist, and we turned to our guests, ready to finally raise our glasses. That's when I heard it. A loud, booming voice from the patio doors deliberately cutting through our song. Surprise! Lucas was back. He was beaming, his charisma turned up to a painful, blinding level, and he was wheeling a massive three-tiered ornate wedding cake. It was a gaudy, horrifying replica of the exact cake I had shown my mother on Pinterest for my actual wedding next year. He held a silver cutting knife aloft like a trophy. "Figured we'd cut the cake," he bellowed to the stunned crowd. "What's a party without cake?" It was a declaration of war, a final public, undeniable power move designed to overshadow me completely, to steal the thunder, not just of my engagement, but of my future wedding. He was forcing my hand in front of everyone, daring me to react. I had to make a choice. Right now. There was a moment of absolute frozen silence. The guests stared confused. The cake was an obscenity, a towering monument to his ego. Lucas beamed, basking in the shock, mistaking it for awe. I saw my mother clasp her hands in delight, my father starting to clap, ready to follow his son's lead. But the Jade who would have burst into tears, who would have shrunk and allowed this final hijacking, was gone. I looked at the cake, I looked at my brother, and I laughed. It wasn't a hysterical laugh. It was a low, clear, genuinely amused sound. It was the laugh of a project manager who has just seen a contractor try to install a disco ball in a monastery. It was absurd. "Wow, Lucas," I said, my voice projecting easily, the microphone still in Marcus's hand. I walked over and took it from him. "That is a lot of cake." I turned to the guests, who were now looking at me, sensing the shift in power. Unfortunately, my brother seems to have confused my engagement party with my wedding day, which, for the record, I said, holding up my left hand and smiling at Marcus, is next year, and this is not the cake we chose. I turned back to Lucas, my smile fixed but my eyes like ice. "You'll have to take it back." His smile faltered, the charisma cracking. "What, Jade, don't be a spoil sport. It's a gift, I paid a fortune for it." "Then I hope you can get a refund," I said, still pleasant. "Nina, Uncle Ben." They were already moving. They understood. This was logistics. Nina put a firm hand on the rolling cart. Uncle Ben, a man who rarely spoke but missed nothing, stepped in front of Lucas, blocking his path. "Son," he said, his voice a low rumble. "The lady said no. Let's get this monstrosity out of the garden." Lucas flushed a deep, ugly red. He looked to my parents for backup. "Mom, Dad, are you going to let her do this?" My mother rushed forward, her face a mask of frantic peacekeeping. "Jade, stop this. It's a beautiful cake. He did this for you." "No, Mom," I said, my voice final. "He did this for him. Now if you'll excuse us, my fiancé and I would like to make our toast." I didn't wait for an answer. I turned my back on them. On the cake, on my sputtering brother, on my horrified mother. I walked back to Marcus. I took his hand, and as I heard the quiet rumble of the cart being wheeled away over the grass, I raised my glass. The rest of the party was a blur, but it was my blur. The right music played. Our friends surrounded us, their warmth and support a tangible thing. Nina stood by me, fiercely protective. Marcus never left my side, his hand on my back, a silent, constant reminder that I was not alone. I felt a profound sense of relief, so total, it was almost dizzying. It was as if I'd been carrying 100-pound weight my entire life and had only just now set it down. I could breathe. I could feel the cool evening air, smell the jasmine I'd planted, and truly taste the champagne. My worth was not up for debate. It was not something they could grant or withhold. It just was. The fallout, of course, was immediate. Lucas, after the cake was deposited on the driveway, didn't storm out. That would have been too honest. He sulked. He sat in a corner, refusing to speak to anyone, radiating a toxic, childish anger. The golden boy, having been denied his spotlight, had become a black hole. My parents predictably tried to corner me by the bar. "We are so disappointed in you, Jade." My father started, his voice heavy with condemnation. "I have never seen such a selfish, ungrateful display." "You embarrassed your brother," my mother added, her eyes flashing with tears. "You embarrassed this family." I looked at their angry, contorted faces. For the first time, I didn't feel a need to justify, argue, or defend myself. The old panic was gone. I just saw them not as all-powerful parents, but as two people desperately trying to pull levers that no longer worked. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, my voice calm. "I set a boundary. Lucas tried to bulldoze it. I stopped him. This was my and Marcus's night, and I protected it. I'm not sorry for that." They stared at me speechless. This was not in their script. I was supposed to cry. I was supposed to apologize. I was supposed to fold. I just picked up my champagne glass and walked away, leaving them standing there in the wreckage of their own expectations. Later that night, after the last guest had left, Marcus and I sat on the patio, the string lights I'd originally chosen twinkling above us. I was exhausted, but I was whole. I thought back to my 16th birthday, to me crying into my pillow over that grape soda-stained dress, believing their lies that I was too sensitive. I thought of all the times I'd quieted my own achievements so Lucas's meager efforts could be celebrated. The injustice of it all, the emotional scars were still there. But they no longer defined me. That girl who cried over the dress had finally learned to fight back. "They're going to be furious," I murmured, leaning my head on Marcus's shoulder. "This isn't over." I knew with a sinking certainty that this night wasn't an end. It was a beginning. Breaking free from a lifetime of this dysfunction wouldn't be a single clean cut. It would be a messy, protracted battle. My phone charging inside lit up. A text, then another, then a call. I didn't have to look. I knew who it was. I sensed the ultimatums, the guilt, the desperate attempts to pull me back in line. But as I looked at Marcus and felt the quiet, solid strength inside my own chest, I wasn't afraid. I was determined. I would face them, on my terms. 6 months later, I stood in front of a full-length mirror, not in my childhood home, but in the bridal suite of a venue Marcus and I had chosen together. It was our wedding day. The air was filled with the scent of lilies and new beginnings, not lemon polish and simmering resentment. I felt a profound sense of calm, a quiet serenity that settled deep in my bones. It was a stark contrast to the frantic, hollowed-out dread I'd felt before the engagement party. I was poised not because I was bracing for impact, but because I was perfectly fully present. My body felt like my own. My choices felt like my own. I was for the first time in my life completely unburdened by the weight of my family's expectations. The ultimatums had come just as I'd predicted. A flurry of texts, then tearful phone calls, then a single icily formal email from my father 2 months ago. "Jade, your mother and I are heartbroken by your behavior. Your refusal to apologize to your brother for the public humiliation you caused him is a disgrace. If you do not make amends with Lucas, we will not be attending your wedding." I remembered reading it, my hand steady on the mouse. The Jade of 6 months ago would have been shattered. She would have seen it as a failure, a confirmation of her worthlessness. But I just saw it for what it was, the last desperate power play from a regime that had lost its control. I hit delete. I did not apologize. And they were not here. I had established a boundary so final, so absolute, that they had bounced right off it. My chosen family, however, was everywhere. Nina, my maid of honor, was fastening the final buttons on my dress, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror, bright with an affection that needed no words. Marcus's parents had embraced me as their own from the moment I'd stood up for myself, their quiet, steadfast support a balm on those old wounds. And as the door opened, Uncle Ben stood there looking dashing in his tux, ready to walk me down the aisle. He'd become a surrogate father, a quiet, solid presence who respected me as an adult. This was my community. This was loyalty. Not the toxic one-way street of blood obligation I'd grown up on, but a loyalty that was earned, reciprocated, and built on mutual respect. This was the true American value, not the family you're born into, but the one you build, the one you choose. As I took Uncle Ben's arm, I felt a lifetime of internalized guilt simply evaporate. I wasn't a bad daughter. I was a survivor. I had navigated a minefield of emotional manipulation and come out the other side not just intact, but stronger. My empathy, which my mother had used as a weapon against me, was now a tool for connection with people who deserved it. My intelligence, which my father had dismissed, had allowed me to analyze the pattern and break it. The ceremony was a beautiful sun-drenched haze. I said my vows to Marcus, my voice clear and unwavering, every word, a promise not just to him, but to myself. I was choosing this. I was choosing us. I felt a fleeting bittersweet pang as I looked out at the guests. An empty space where my parents and brother should have been. It wasn't anger. It was a quiet, sad acknowledgement of their choice. They had chosen their pride, their flawed golden boy, over me. They had chosen the past over the future. That was their loss, not mine. I was no longer vulnerable to their judgment. I had clarity. I had resilience. I had finally complete self-determination. At the reception after the speeches from Nina and Marcus's best man, I stood up, glass in hand. The room quieted. I looked at Marcus, his face so full of love it nearly took my breath away. I looked at Nina and Uncle Ben, and all the friends who had formed a wall of support around me. I just want to say something. I started, my voice ringing with a calm joy. A wedding is about celebrating a new beginning, but for me it's also about celebrating the family we've chosen. I raised my glass. It's about the people who see you, who support you, and who stand by you not out of obligation but out of genuine love and respect. It's about finding your people. I looked directly at Marcus. And finding your person. I didn't need to mention the past. I didn't need to relitigate the betrayal. My triumph wasn't in their defeat. It was in my own freedom. My internal dialogue, once a chorus of self-doubt and their critical voices, was now just my own. I was centered. I was at peace. Later, Marcus and I slipped away from the dancing for a moment just to breathe. We stood under the stars, the sound of laughter and music drifting from the hall. I leaned my head on his shoulder, savoring the autonomy, the quiet joy of a moment that was completely, unequivocally ours. I was no longer Jade Brooks, the dutiful daughter, the accommodating sister, the family's shock absorber. I was just Jade. I was a wife. I was a friend. And I was free. The relief was total. The catharsis complete. And with that final, quiet realization, Jade truly closed that painful chapter of her life. What did you think of her decision to cut her family off completely? We value your thoughts and read every single comment. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and click the notification bell for more. Thank you for listening. This has been a story from Revenge Hour. We'll see you next time.